her place. Amen.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Papa, will you pray and help us?
Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you today, give you praise and glory. Thank you so much for your word and the missionaries that are out there, dear Jesus. We just pray for them, for their safety and for their well-being and for their ministry as they go out into the world. Just thank you so much. As well as our so that we can tonight as she brings this message of the missionary field. Just welcome. God, please. In Jesus, we just ask these things in your name.
We thank you for giving her a job.
Oh, yeah.
We thank Allie for taking advantage. Amen.
Reckon we get somebody to take up an offering.
Can you imagine the end of the day? Just again.
Just ask for blessing on this offering. Page 570 in it. Very cool. I'm going to try this. 570. Upon life's boundless ocean where mighty billows roll, I fixed my hope in Jesus, blessed anchor of my soul. Where trials I rest upon His mercy and trust Him more. I've anchored in Jesus, the storms of life I'll brave. I've anchored in Jesus, I fear no wind or wave. I've anchored in Jesus, for He hath power to save. I've anchored in the rock of ages. He keeps my soul from evil, gives me blessed peace. His voice has filled the waters and rivers on seas. My pilot and deliverer, to Him I can fly. For always when I need Him, He's at my side. I've anchored in Jesus, the storms of life I'll brave. I've anchored in Jesus, I fear no wind or wave. I've anchored in Jesus, for He hath power to save. I've anchored in the rock of ages. He is my friend and Savior, in Him my anchor's kept. He drives away my sorrows and shields me from the blast. My faith I'm looking over beyond my troubled sea. There I'll be overhead, there for me. I've anchored in Jesus, the storms of life I'll brave. I've anchored in Jesus, I fear no wind or wave. I've anchored in Jesus, for He hath power to save. I've anchored in the rock of ages. Yeah, well, I was hit or miss. So, we're going to do 650 next.
I know that song.
All right. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansion bright and blessed, He'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, proudly overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven, what a day that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory will the cost of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open, we shall tread the streets of gold. When we all get to heaven, what a rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. All right. Thanks for helping me out there.
Thanks for singing. Yeah.
Huh?
Thanks for singing.
Oh, so well.
Alright, I'm gonna give a little update on our alabaster that we took up this past year. Overall, the whole churches, we received $17,938.70 is what we received in alabasters.
At this church or?
No, all the churches. All the churches.
I didn't remember that.
But that money that we received, all the churches received, and that money was supposed to go to build bathrooms, and it got put on hold. For some reason, we couldn't get it transferred. Now I think they're working on it so we can get it transferred to where it needs to go to build those bathrooms over. So, and then Valentine's for Jesus is coming up, but we've already sent in money. And right now, the district has received $2,212.08 so far. And the deadline for that is March the 1st. So they have till then to get more money. But right now we have $2,212.08 in that account.
But if somebody wanted to still donate, put
Yeah.
that on the card, Valentine for Jesus.
Yeah,
it can
that
be-
we get into that, yeah. And Joshua and Katie Hahn, you know, they've been in Bulgaria and they've been there. And then last week, I think it was, that they held a revival in their home and had dinner for their village that they're in. And it was 10:30 in the morning here, but 6:30 in that there where they are. So it's a bit of a time difference. But that's all the updates that I have from November till now, what we've received from the district. But tonight, I'm gonna talk about South Sudan and the scattered people that they have there. Maylee, you can hit the space bar. Our objective tonight is to know how the Nazarene Church has entered into Sudan to share the gospel using refugee camps as the base despite their long history of civil war and the unpredictable future. So they've been like in the civil war area where they've got multiple refugee camps, so we're just in a certain one. Okay, Maylee, next slide. The scripture for tonight is in 2 Corinthians 10:15. But having hope when your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged because by you according to our rule abundantly. And that's in 2 Corinthians. All right, next slide. Some fast facts for you this first. The Church of the Nazarene officially entered South Sudan in 2012. So we didn't actually enter into South Sudan territory until 2012. And in 2019, South Sudan reported 78 churches of the Nazarene with 8,131 members. So 25 of the churches have been full organized. So that was 7 years that they had built 78 churches. And then a brutal civil war made it necessary to separate into 2 countries in Africa. So it has separated into 2 countries. South Sudan reported a population of 11,062,113 in 2019. South Sudan is located in the African region, and there are more than 2 million refugees. That is making South Sudan the largest refugee crisis in Africa. And 63% of the refugees is under the age of 24 years old. So I thought that was pretty interesting and how sad it is that most of those, I'm 23, so it's my age and younger that's not got a home that are in these refugee camps. Juba is the capital of South Sudan, and these are just fast facts about the death rate in mothers giving birth is the highest in Africa. So the death rate is the mothers giving birth, they die. It's not others. Like the Civil War is not causing the deaths, it's the mothers because they don't have the medical care that they need there. English is the official language in South Sudan, and over half the population, that's, I think the age of 18 is I put there, so that's over half the population is young. Okay, Maylee? Is that all I put on there?
Yeah.
I mean, half the population is under 18?
Isn't that something?
Yeah, because like the death rate, the mothers giving birth, so that's taken like a lot of the mothers that are giving birth, like 90% of it said.
How about the fathers though? You wouldn't think. Wow.
And we just entered into South Sudan in 2012, and so it's 2022, so it's only been 2 years that we've been there, so. But I have a few excerpts from this lesson, but any questions about the facts before we jump into that I can answer?
So, you say we just ended in 2012, so
Yes.
we've been there 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
and, so are we providing medical help?
We're just now starting, 3 years ago is when we started providing like hospitals, working in the hospitals to help them get the medical care they need. So it's only been 3 years since we've been doing that.
Oh, okay,
So,
so maybe we can turn this around.
yeah,
Save some of these money.
yeah, because they just don't have the medicines and stuff that you have the care after they get right there.
Do you know, like, when that statistic was done?
Let me look.
You know, as far as the half the population being under 18?
This thing was taken in, this statistic was in 2018.
Okay, so that's before we started
Really?
helping medically.
Mhm.
So
So it's-
hopefully it's.
It's
a
starting
lot
to
better
get
than
up,
that.
yeah. We just not got any recent data since
Okay.
2018 on that. Mhm.
So it's quite obviously very young mothers that are dying, doing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
maybe we can start sending more people over there, because this is just a new area that we've been, because we just go to, like, Joshua and Katie Harden, they're in Bulgaria, we have Ethiopia, and some other places, but South Sudan is probably not the, how I would say this, most important one on the list that we go to, not most frequently go there. Any other questions on that?
A lot of people under 18 in that population.
Yes.
Did you give us the population?
Yeah, it was mainly, yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a
Mhm.
lot of teenage kids, isn't it? Boy, that, I just didn't see that. It
I
just-
know, it
wow.
surprised me when I
It's
started looking at all these, that they were under the age of 18.
So that pretty much means
The
probably
young
that
mothers.
lifespan there is not.
Not very long.
Well,
What happened to the babies?
I don't know, I haven't, in this lesson, it didn't tell me, it just told me about the mothers in it, so. I'm not sure, I mean, they're in that refugee camp, but I don't know if those babies are getting the medical attention they're needing either, or. other
So-
ones.
I wonder how many of us is over.
I know, it doesn't tell me how many were over there, I don't think it's a lot, though.
So we're just doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the end of your slide.
Yeah, and then, yeah, she can come back. Maybe we can come back, sit down. The next part of it is just the story stuff. I think, Darlene, you have the Pastor John story.
Pastor John, is that it?
Okay, that one's the first one.
Okay.
If you want to copy that one.
Oh, I forgot to go up there. I heard where he is.
So you need to be amplified.
I don't think they have that.
Well, that's probably true.
That's true.
That's one thing I've never had anybody tell me, that they couldn't hear me. John was born in 1973 in the southeast part of Sudan near the Ethiopian border. When his father died early, his mother became the sole parent raising him, his brother and his sister in a country with depressed resources. John was a teenager when political unrest escalated. The government decided to fill their armies by abducting children. That's when John escaped Sudan. He became part of what is known as the Lost Boys of Sudan, about 200,000 of them, who were forced to flee their country to escape almost certain death in the military. John walked to Ethiopia and became a refugee, living in an Ethiopian refugee camp for the next 15 years. While he was lost in the news, lost to his family, lost to his childhood and adolescence, he was not lost to God. The fact that John was even open to hearing about God is the first miracle. His parents were traditional African worshippers of many unknown gods. In 1995, while in Ethiopia, some friends told John about a new church, and I'm going to attempt this. Is it 80s Ababa? Called Church of the Nazarene. John heard the gospel and the invitation to holy living. In 1996, John gave his life to Jesus and asked God to sanctify him. He also joined the Church of the Nazarene, and it's white out. It says something to work with you. Something decision changed the rest of John's life. He found peace he had never known in all the unsettlement and displacement he had experienced. But he didn't want to be selfish about his new way of life. He carried a heavy burden that his people could learn the same peace and find an abundant life that didn't depend on political security. He started sharing the gospel in his refugee camp with other Sudanese. John met and married Naamah in May 1995, while they both were living in the refugee camp. Their first son was born in 1997. Unfortunately, a second child died in 1999. In 2000, he was given a chance to leave the refugee camp and resettle in Australia, which would give his young family a better life. Life in the refugee camp was terrible, John remembers as he thought, if I go to Australia, it will be better. But God said, no, stay, serve my people. I called you to remain in the camp and share the suffering. He also wanted to share the good news with his fellow countrymen from South Sudan. However, crossing the border into South Sudan was not easy. He joined a group of 15 young men who agreed that John could accompany them. It was too dangerous to travel alone. They walked for 7 days without food or clean water to return to what was now South Sudan. Once across the border, John invited people to sit under a tree with him and talk about God. Within his first month and a half, he started 13 churches. Later that same year, he added 30 more. Today, John and his family live in Uganda, where he continues to work in refugee camps. He serves as a missionary for South Sudan, Western Ethiopia, and refugee camps in East Africa. It is a daunting responsibility. John will be the first one to tell you he has not accomplished this alone. Opening new work is always a collaboration that God orchestrates in amazing, and then write it out.
Do you have family members? Maybe, do you have a family?
That's fine.
Yeah, okay.
I'll just sit right here.
Yeah, do you have any?
You know, Darlene's thing right there, it's amazing that somebody like this John could come up and do, well, it's not really amazing when you put God in it.
It's not, but to be raised opposite,
Yes.
totally not being taught that at all.
Yeah, his rearing didn't promote that.
Right,
It was God.
right, it had to be God. Pull that down somewhere, because I want to, you can do that when you want to, but.
Can you hear me now?
If you see what just a little.
Okay.
Or in the car.
Do the best you can with what you got to work with.
Okay. John realized that the only way that ministry in South Sudan would survive is by identifying and training leaders. One of the first persons he met on his first trip back to his home country was Peter. Peter was a Christian but not a Nazarene. John remembers that Peter really didn't know what he believed in. He was still searching. Peter came to the first service that John organized and found interesting. He invited a friend to come with him to the second service. When he came back to the third service with another friend, John knew he needed to nurture the relationships. John invited Peter and his friends to learn about the articles of faith that are articulated what Nazarenes believed. Peter and his friends agreed with all of them. When it was time for John to leave South Sudan, he met with Peter and left him in charge of the 4-person church plant. Imagine the surprise John encountered when he returned 3 months later and found 150 meeting in the church. I did not build that church, John says. It was the help from Peter that grew that church. He connected with people while I was not there. He used the information I gave him during that short time together. Another example of how John found critical leadership involves the story of a young woman John knew about the refuge camp near a church of the Nazarene in South Sudan and wanted to start a new work within the camp. He began to pray about how to begin the work. He knew that living situations were dire and refugees had little beyond meager supplies. However, he found a young woman who was trying to do some work in the camp on her own. She attended the Church of the Nazarene nearby. John recognized the heart of a leader and began working with her. She was researching more people in the community than John could because she lived there. Success is when you see people doing well, John says. If we fail to attract people, we should be asking what is wrong. People need love, John explains. When they see people showing love and living a life of love, they get encouraged and are attracted to what is happening there.
Okay, this is Ministry Challenges, the refugee crisis. As explained earlier, the refugee crisis for the Sudanese is critical. Refugees in South Sudan number over 2 million. It has become the worst refugee crisis in Africa. 63% of the refugees are under 18. For that reason, refugee camps in North and South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda represent possibilities for ministry. Early missionaries like Howie Shute and Friday Gonda made inroads that John nurtures and multiplies. Another challenge inside and outside of the refugee camp is that more than 60 ethnic groups are living in South Sudan. Most belong to either the Dinka tribe or the Nur tribe. The plan Pastor John uses to disciple and plant churches is a simple plan, but not an easy one. Develop leaders in each of the refugee camps, teach them to disciple others, and help the leaders use the discipleship groups to plant a church within the camp. John explains it this way. God calls me to minister to most disadvantaged people on earth, refugees from Sudan. They are refugees who left from their home and countries and have nothing, but they are open to hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ. I trust that God is going to use refugees in many different ways when they go back to their home countries. Since John cannot be with new leaders as often as he would like, he takes advantage of any opportunity when he is ministering within refugee camps. However, there are restrictions he must follow. Leaders are not allowed to travel from the camp to another. John trains a leader from within the camp who goes back to the refugee camp and trains other leaders. And then this is persecution.
Persecution is one of the challenges John and other leaders face as they continue to build a church from within refugee camps. Despite numerous ceasefire agreements, persecution, especially of Christians, remains a constant threat. John is always concerned about persecution when a new person becomes a Christian. Families of new converts often persecute their own children for converting to Christianity. It requires another level of support for someone who must function without family after a decision to live for Christ. The possibility of persecution makes it, I'm just going to fill in what I think it is, makes it difficult in meeting together in some meetings. Like the time he was preparing a service where one of the general superintendents would officiate. They couldn't stage the service in Ethiopia or any other place where family could come. It was too dangerous. He had to find a remote area and a way to get the group of new pastors there, as well as the general superintendent. However, John also understands persecution because of his own experience. 2 weeks before the ordination was to take place, John's wife went into labor. They didn't have a car to drive to the hospital, so they called a taxi. When Jesus found out that their baby would not be born, when John found out that their baby would not be born until morning, he decided to go home and come back early the next day. When John left the hospital, he was brutally attacked by a group of men. They nearly killed him and left him unconscious. When John came to, he went to the police, but they didn't do anything about the attack. Bruised and visibly battered, he returned to the hospital in time for his son to be born the next morning. They named their new baby Kenan. It means the day is not ours. To John and Neil, it meant that every day belonged to God. It meant there were more days to live than just one day of persecution. Persecution is still a big problem in South Sudan and surrounding countries, and probably will continue. But the days do not belong to persecution. John knows they belong to God, and so he continues to minister to refugees. Wow, they even killed their own family? I didn't know that.
Why would you do that?
So John, from the time he was young, had dealt with a lot by leaving his country and going across the border, and then even coming back across the border was difficult. This is just keep praying for South Sudan. Despite negotiations and peace agreements, fighting continues in South Sudan, putting people at risk, ravaging the land, destroying the infrastructure, and continuing to make life difficult. However, the good news is that because of the faithful leaderships of missionaries like Pastor John, there are Nazarene churches in all refugee camps. John shares these prayer requests. So there are 4 prayer requests that John has sent for us to be praying for. Pray for the protection of leaders within the refugee camps. Pray for the new Christians that will be bold and not give up. And that would probably be hard in that situation, because I know it's hard for new Christians here to not give up because of temptation. But in that situation, it may be harder because they are in that civil war and all the violence going on. Pray that we will be able to disciple the refugees so that they will take Christ with them back to their homeland and when it is safe to return. Pray that their displaced people experience love from those who share the love of Christ. So is there other things that we could probably think of to pray for them, or how can we help, or other things?
Well, we really need to pray for the medical attention
Yeah.
that they're needing. And the persecution, you know, we haven't yet, but it's coming. It's coming our way. They're going out talking about this, about how this one world government is trying to take over. Yeah, they don't have room for that. So yes, especially medical attention and for salvation of those that are under persecution.
It is hard with persecution of new Christians, that if, just like John being brutally attacked, probably because of his religion, that some people are afraid to be Christians because they're afraid of that. So.
Talking about families killing their own people, they're pressured into that quite a bit, and some of them just don't care. So, how can people be so against God? I can't get it. It just, they don't calculate.
Any other questions or comments?
Wonderful. Missionary is very interesting to me. They're, just like Jesus left his heavenly home, these missionaries are leaving their home here on earth, going into wherever God sends them, and they're being obedient to do that. Just like this John right here.
Just like what we studied Sunday,
Yes.
you know? Said, what can I do?
Yeah.
Leave all your stuff behind and follow me. Have to be really faithful and sold out. That's for sure. Just got everything you have and
Did the church take up the collection you refer to this as what?
Valentine's for Jesus.
Valentine's for Jesus?
Yeah, we already took up one and we sent it in, but we can all send more money because we have a deadline to March the 1st.
I don't know where I heard this, but recently, they were talking about one of the major denominations in this country. There's going to be 3 denominations. And they said the only group that was following literal interpretation of the Bible was the group in Africa. This is a major denomination that's breaking up. One group's going with homosexuals and all that sort of stuff in the church. The other group is what we call traditional. And the only group that was really following the Bible is that they take it literally in Africa. That's amazing.
Yeah, it
Yes. I shouldn't say this, but that was a Methodist. And someone that knew him well enough to tell me what was going on said that the strong group was the ones in Africa. Of course, you understand why. They're facing persecution every day. Yes. We need to look up Sudan on the internet. I don't remember who the adversaries are, but about half of Africa is just in turmoil.
Mhm.
Chinese are in there, causing all kinds of trouble. The devil's in there. There's what they call strong men, just
Yeah.
just feel stupid that you don't know about Sudan. Nice to know our churches in there.
I'd be curious to see what the statistics are now, since we've been there.
Yeah.
You know,
I could probably look and do more research on that.
I'll see what I can find. I wonder what took us so long to get in there. Political.
Sometimes like they're tribes and they have chiefs and they believe in a lot of like witch doctrine and stuff. So you have to get in good with them and get them to trust you before you can actually go into their tribe. So it just takes a little longer because I mean, some of them are scared to trust you. There's more information that I probably could put, but we've probably been here a whole lot. I've done on that, but you can go on our website, the Nazarene Missions website, and there's different things that you can pull up of different countries we're in, the facts that we have about them and stuff like that. It just gives you a whole bunch, not just pull those snippets out of it. So
That stuff that pointed out what you were reading, was that accidental? Or?
yeah, it's the copier.
Oh,
it does it all the time. I don't know
Okay.
how we can
I
fix
just
it.
thought maybe that might have been some
it wasn't
political.
much.
No, it's
no.
just little things like
It's
the
just
words
like-
are.
Yeah, and it was
Just
just,
a word.
yeah, just a few words, it wasn't
Okay.
a lot.
Yeah. Any other comment, concerns?
That's very interesting,
Yeah,
especially that percentage,
yeah.
63%
Mm-hmm.
are under the age of 18. That's
I know it is.
phenomenal. I would think there's a lot of AIDS.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
Africa was getting
Yes.
AIDS pretty big. Yeah, I would
And that's
think a
all-
lot of it is war too.
Yeah,
That a lot of the adults have been conscripted into
that's true.
different militaries.
Yeah.
So it's, your question was, what about the men? But that's,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. We start thinking, not just the mothers die.
Yeah.
And the persecution and killing them for, that makes no sense. Just sit there and think about that.
I would think a lot of it will be they don't have the medical supplies to take care of them with.
Well, that's one thing that happened to AIDS crisis that they had there. And they were ignorant, they probably didn't know where it was coming from.
The last lesson I did, I can't remember the country I talked about, but we talked COVID and stuff when COVID hit. That they didn't have the medical needs to take care of them, and over half their population died from COVID. So
Yeah,
a lot of these countries we're in doesn't have the medical needs that we have here.
We're fortunate sometimes, we take it for granted. We just, we fuss and complain about things, but if we just, and it's, I mean, and I'm referring to myself, but if you really stop and think, really look at the big picture, we're so blessed.
Yes.
Every day.
Yeah, that we live in a country that recognizes God, you know.
Mhm.
This is not about the lesson, but before we're done, I want to, ask for a prayer request.
Okay. Any other comments, concerns? I mean, I can take prayer requests now if we want to. So, Darlene.
First I have a praise report. To remind